So today here in France, it is the rentrée. That means the big return to school and work today. My rentrée to the programme as well. And the political rentrée in France has been rather a shock with that announcement from the Prime Minister that he's going to hold that confidence vote, plunging, as I said, once again, France into political uncertainty. Well, let's talk a lot more about that then. We're going to talk to historian of modern France at Queen Mary University of London, Andrew Smith, who joins us now from there. Andrew, good to have you with us. He's going to lose, isn't he, François Bayrou?
It seems very likely. You mentioned, of course, this is the back to school, back to work, and famously, François Bayrou has said he's been the only person not working, not taking holiday over the summer. He's had his sleeves rolled up. He's been there, trying to kind of find an answer to France's budgetary crisis. But I think ultimately it looks like he might have his eye on a little bit of an off-peak deal and taking his holidays in September, because it does seem like this is an absolutely wild gamble. The political logic is not there. He staged this as a binary decision, as he puts it, between chaos and responsibility. But the kind of parliamentary logic just is not there to actually support him. He needs to draw support from either of his kind of opponents. That would be really from the Socialist Party, which he did last time round in order to pass a budget. But we've already heard at the weekend, Olivier Faure, the head of the Socialist Party saying, really it's inevitable. He'll go and speak to him this week out of politeness, but there's absolutely no chance. And we know on the far right as well, they might have pretended at times to agree with his stance on budgets and all the rest of it, but they've already said they want to vote of no confidence. They also want a dissolution. They also want a new election. They want all sorts of political chaos. So that choice between chaos and responsibility so far seems a pretty stark and obvious one for most of the French Assembly. Chaos it is.
Yeah, it certainly is. And I mean, looking at the wider picture as well, Andrew, I mean, let's not forget last autumn we had the government of Michel Barnier that only lasted for a couple of months. Now we've got François Bayrou. It looks like we could well be heading for a third prime minister in a few weeks. I mean, it's hardly very reassuring to anyone, is it? Either the political class, the financial markets.
Absolutely, yeah. We've seen, of course, MEDEF, which is the kind of business lobbying organization for French entrepreneurs. The head, Patrick Martin, has been all over the French airwaves over the last week or so, talking about this idea of really trying to put people, on alert to say this has to be about stability. We've seen business leaders asking for stability. This is part of the problem, though. When François Bayrou gave this, apocalyptic speech about France's indebtedness, he called it a chronic illness of debt. He spoke about, really an existential crisis. He sort of cut out all the possibility for actually working with other parties and making any changes to the proposed budget. We've seen other proposals from different people. Of course, the Socialists, they proposed really halving the amount of savings and increasing the amount of kind of increased tax expenditure. They proposed a new wealth tax, for example, which might help to actually do something about it. But really, there is this difficult moment where François Bayrou has said this is existential. France needs to change now, or it really portends disaster. He's shown himself unwilling to deal even at the margins. Originally, I thought maybe the much vaunted plan to cut 2 public holidays might be a stalking horse that would be given up in order to strike a deal. But it seems no, that's, he is sticking to his guns. This is his way or the highway. And ultimately, it just seems like there really is no ground on which to build a political consensus. He says it is not about the Prime Minister or the government, but the opposition will certainly read it as that, especially when the Prime Minister is neither powerful nor popular enough to drive this through. And we know that popular anger is rising, especially with this big social movement, the Block Everything movement due on September the 10th.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that next, Andrew. I mean, we've got the political problem, we've got the financial problem, but also ordinary people are starting to get more and more angry. I mean, there's potentially a way that this bank holiday thing might change, but that's one of the things which is really annoying ordinary people as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. There's a sense that this is, falling on people in a sort of unjust way. We know that François Bayrou's party did not support originally when Macron was elected way back when the elimination of the wealth tax. We know that there's been chat about trying to push for a more kind of progressive taxation and meetings over the summer with the president to try and push that through. But we've seen little ground given. And of course, we're seeing the employers' lobbies, warning about any increased taxation. But where that kind of social unrest is coming from is, well, there's a meeting today, an intersyndical, an inter-union movement from a lot of the kind of big unions, where they decide what they're going to support in terms of this sort of nebulous 10th September movement. Colleagues, to block everything. There's a whiff of the Gilets jaunes. It started off in like Telegram, the kind of secure social network. You've seen it spread out through other social media. It's kind of supported by some figures in the extreme right, certainly supported by Jean-Luc Mélenchon and François Bayrou. We've seen it kind of other people cautiously engaging with it because of the lack of clarity around some of the goals. But really, it's about purchasing power. It's about public anger. It's about an idea that people are bearing an unjust weight. Now, we saw that kind of thing before. And actually, I thought there was a very good interview with Marie-Lise Léon, who is the head of the CFDT union, one of the biggest unions in France. One of the big things she said is, every centimetre of kind of essentially like social deprivation leads to another 1,000 votes for the far right. And that's really where we are at this moment. We had François Bayrou talking about the debt piling up over the last 20 years. The difficulty is, who's been in power those last 20 years? And that's really the difficulty now, is it doesn't look like new ideas, it doesn't look like new solutions. It looks like more of the same. And this is the difficulty in terms of calling for this confidence vote. People aren't that confident that more of the same is actually going to solve this crisis. And that's why we're seeing this kind of, I think, envenoming of political debate and really a shift towards a lack of confidence, not just amongst political parties, but by ordinary French people in these structures that are used to govern them. So I think there needs to be a little bit more invention, a little bit more listening, a little bit more, attempt to actually solve this with some innovation rather than just more austerity, as we've seen.
Okay, Andrew, I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm going to put you on the spot. Can you think of a way forward? Because the trouble isn't it, that if Bayrou falls, which presumably he will, the left will then claim that the left are the biggest bloc, so they should be putting forward the next prime minister. The right will say, the far right will say they are the biggest party, so they should have the prime minister. But whoever it is, whether it's the left, whether it's the right, whether it's someone in the centre, they're almost bound to fail again, aren't they?
It's really difficult. I think one of the big things that needs to be looked at are ideas of progressive taxation. Of course, when Macron was first elected, the elimination of the wealth tax was all about opening up kind of French entrepreneurialism. And of course, that's why we see MEDEF pushing against any attempt to backslide on that. But I think there needs to be some give that allows, for example, the Socialist Party, some of the more moderate there, to look and give them the opportunity to separate themselves from Mélenchon. We know that he will not unite the left around any kind of party except behind him. The left, if it wants to govern, if it wants to move, I think the centrist majority, Macron's party, needs to look to where it can be instructed from the left. It needs to give on that progressive taxation. They will find, I think, support among social partners. They will find support if we can see, responsibility over chaos from people like Bayrou's party, from the Republicans. If they can draw something out of them, a concession on progressive taxation, then I think we could see a budget passed, which would bring together the Socialist Party and the centre. But that really is a very difficult thing to see because of the way things have kind of transpired, even over the last week. But I think that, for me, is the only way forward, unless we do the same thing again as we saw it. We've got, 3 prime ministers in just over a year. Maybe a fourth to charm, who knows?
And finally, Andrew, there's one other thing that could happen, and I'm going to use that quote from that book behind you, Rien n'est perdu, nothing is lost. One thing that could be lost is Emmanuel Macron himself, the president, of course. A lot of parties, a lot of ordinary people saying that actually the problem here is Emmanuel Macron. The only way to solve it is to completely go to the country again and have a new presidential election.
This is one of the really big things that we've seen pushed. Of course, that's General Charles de Gaulle behind me on the appeal of the 18th of June. Now, one of the big difficulties you had is all summer, Bayrou's been talking about his Mendes moment. Now, we know that Mendes fell in February 1955 to a vote of confidence. He didn't solve anything. it was that guy that came back a few years later to start a new republic, the Fifth Republic. In reality, I think this is one of the difficulties. There is no automatic constitutional mechanism by which Emmanuel Macron has to submit himself to a new election, has to open up new legislative elections, anything like that. At the moment, I think really there needs to be some kind of change to find a solution. But I think it would be very much against his interests. And actually, this is a moment of, I think, a lot of global turbulence. And we saw this from employers as well. We've got global turbulence, we've got economic turbulence, and we've got this French factor at the same time. I think this would only increase instability in France at a very difficult moment. And I think the international role of the French presidency has been very clear, especially leading on things like Ukraine, leading with regards to the kind of instability of the US at this present moment. And it's actually on the international stage where Macron's legitimacy, I think, has been demonstrated. Now, that's difficult at home, but that's really the job of the Prime Minister. So it's down to Parliament to find a solution to this problem. It's not down to a vote on the presidency. And for me, that really is just political opportunism by his rivals who want to get into that seat even quicker. For me, there is still a need for Macron to stay the course and for this problem to be solved in the Assembly, which ultimately is where it starts and where it ends.
We shall see, Andrew. Thanks very much, Andrew Smith, joining us there from London, historian of modern France at Queen Mary University. Thanks, as ever, for being with us. Good to have you with us.